Hello, LinkedIn. So usually I start out with that music, and something happened where it sounded like it was playing two tunes at once. I'm like, oh, let's just stop because that's just painful. So Rakhi Voria is joining me today. I was so excited to see so many attendees signed up to hear what Rakhi has to say, and it's amazing. So let us know where you're coming from. If you've joined us live, if you're joining us and it happens to be a replay, let me know. Hit hashtag replay. And Rakhi, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's so great to be here, Jen.
Yeah, when I think of you, it's like you're one of the most inspirational women I know in sales. Like, I've seen so many webinars with you, and I think through the National Association of Women Sales Professionals is where I came across you first. And I'm just like, everybody needs to know you. So
that means a lot. There aren't very many women, in sales. And so I'm always jumping at the opportunity to join events like this, to meet women like you, because we got to all stick together, right?
Yeah, we absolutely do. It's absolutely crucial. So tell us a little bit about your journey. I saw you're one of the top 100 global sales leaders, and you've been in sales for a long time, but also you started out in marketing. And just for those who don't know you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am currently at IBM. I've been here for a little over 2 years. I lead the digital sales development function. So we have a few hundred sellers around the globe. They're responsible for client engagement, lead progression, and closure of select deals. And before I came to IBM, I was at Microsoft. And a little bit about my journey into sales. I spent about 7 years at the company, but when I applied to work at Microsoft, I actually didn't apply for a sales role. I had applied for a marketing position because, as you said, I had some marketing experience. So I thought it'd be a great foray into the company. And so I kind of had thought, all right, let me apply for a marketing position. And it was actually the recruiter at Microsoft who put me in the queue for sales. And she said, have you ever considered a role in sales? I think you would be great at it. You listen well, you communicate effectively, you have a strong track record of success. That's what it takes to be successful in sales. And at the time, I think I had this visceral reaction, and I was like, oh my God, I would never go into sales. It's so masculine. It's so competitive. I don't have the personality for it. And unfortunately, I think a lot of women have those similar notions. We just have this view that sales is a very masculine profession. But because I really liked Microsoft, I just kind of went with it. And I ended up landing my first job as a licensing sales specialist. So, it was kind of a random situation, but the recruiter was right. Lo and behold, I was really good at sales. I enjoyed it. I learned so many tangible skills. And now fast forward several years, I've made an entire career out of sales. So I started in a traditional kind of carry a bag sales role. Then I moved to the Microsoft financing division and business development for the Americas. So my job was basically kind of quasi sales marketing, trying to grow the payment solutions business. And then my last job at Microsoft, I helped them to build their inside sales team as the chief of staff to the corporate vice president of the global inside sales organization. So it was a new team the company invested in. I was the fourth employee on the team. We hired about 2,000 sellers in 3 years. So it was really, really massive growth. And I think through that experience, I realized just how much of a passion I have around building and scaling high performing sales teams. And that's what I've been doing at IBM as well for the past couple of years. But I think one of the things that I've learned is that in order to do that, you have to have diversity, specifically women in your sales roles. And so that's why I'm hugely passionate about that topic, especially because of my own foray into sales, but really looking forward to being here today and talking about some of these topics today.
Yeah, now you've had an inspiring journey. So as you're a sales leader who's grown like global sales teams, when you think about diversity, how do you find diverse talent?
Yeah, that's a great question because unfortunately, I think so many people post jobs and they say, women aren't applying to my roles, or Asians or other marginalized groups aren't applying for my roles, so there must not be any out there. And it's like, wait a minute, no, there's plenty out there. It's just you have to be really intentional about how and where you actually recruit them. So there's so many things that we can do to fix the beginning of the recruitment process. And I think part of it is being really intentional, as I said, about even the verbiage that you're using on job descriptions, for example. if you do a Google search right now for a sales role, you would be surprised to see how many jobs out there have very masculine language. Even today, some of them specify that they're looking for people with a competitive sports background, for example. I think about myself. I mean, if I saw that on a job description straight out of graduate school, college, whatever it might have been, I would have thought to myself, okay, I can barely throw or catch a ball. How am I ever going to be good at sales if you need to be, someone with a competitive sports background? So during the time when I mentioned when we were at Microsoft hiring those 2,000 people at scale, it literally redlined some of the job descriptions and removed some of that masculine language, and it made a huge difference. And another idea is really just around where you're looking for people. So I think some of the best sales hires I've ever made have come from really non-traditional sources, like military, for example. People from military have a really strong sense of camaraderie, teamwork, resilience, perseverance in the face of adversity. Real estate agents, for example, retail store employees. So I've always tried to push my teams at both IBM and Microsoft to really think about not just going after the traditional enterprise technology software sales background, but really thinking outside of the box. And you'd be surprised, some of those, as I said, do end up tending to be some of the best sales hires you might ever make.
Yeah, no, I know that the transferable skills, I'm originally from retail. My journey was I opened up stores across the country and eventually ended up in the cigar industry, where I had software salespeople coming in to book a conference room. And I'm like, how am I working so many hours a week when these people just come in, book the conference room, do their demo, go to the cigar bar, light their cigar, sign their contracts, and they're done. They're like, let's go to the golf course.
Yep.
Like, how do I do that? Right. And so when I think about transferable skills, and just like with me in retail, I was responsible for the P&L by square foot. Like, what was the profit by square foot? If I could do that, I could, do SaaS sales. If I can do liquor inventory and tell you how much liquor I'm going to need over the next few weeks, you should be able to have intelligent conversations about some of those same topics around pricing and negotiation that people don't necessarily consider. So I think that's super important. Yeah. So Maureen says, being raised by military dad is my best quality. Yeah. And the military background is an excellent point as well. What are some other ways or some other ideas around getting more women into sales that you've had?
Well, I think, there's some tangible things that you can do around even just your website, for example. This seems like a really small thing, but it's kind of that concept. If you can't see it, you can't be it. And so sometimes I've looked at the career websites for the teams that I've been hiring for, and I've been disappointed to see that it's primarily men whose photos are on the website, and primarily white men. And if you're trying to showcase that you have a diverse culture and a diverse team, you have to show those people. They have to be front and center. So even some of those small things end up being the big things later on when you're talking to recruiters. I also think as you're interviewing candidates, make sure that you always have a woman who's on the interview panel. I have interviewed for sales teams where I've only met with men, and I've said, are there women in your organization? And are they actually rising up the ranks? Because it's not enough just to have women in more junior sales roles. You want to actually have women in the senior sales roles, because I think, studies have shown that women tend to hire other women. So the net effect of bringing in more women into sales leadership positions is that you'll start to see that trickle down across all levels of the organization. So those are some of the other suggestions I would share.
Yeah, and you make some excellent points. I went to a webinar with another one by the National Association of Women Sales Professionals, where we were talking about diversity and inclusion, and that in order to be effective with anyone you bring on from a diversity perspective, that you need to have inclusion. That inclusion actually comes first. So what would you say are some best practices around creating an inclusive culture?
I think that's the most important thing, actually, because over the past several years, so many companies have made strides around how do we get more women into sales? And that's great. I mean, the percentage of women in sales has barely increased over the past decade. We have a serious problem there. So it's been great to see concerted efforts around that. But what's been keeping me up at night is that it doesn't matter how many women you're bringing into your organization if you're not fostering an environment where they can thrive and succeed when they get there. What's the point bringing them in the door if a year from now they're going to leave because you don't actually have the right culture, the right tools, the right trainings, all of that? So I think there's a few different things that we can do to focus on retention. One of them is really around community. Making sure that they feel like they have mentors, preferably female mentors, for example, around them who can actually help them grow and succeed, or peer learning circles of other women, I think is always helpful. I think even reevaluating the perks that you're offering specifically geared toward women is important. So for example, is the prize that you're going to give out in any given quarter for highest sales going to be tickets to the basketball game? Maybe a woman might not appreciate that. Maybe they would, but maybe they would rather just have a cash prize, for example, or maybe they'd rather have a day off. So those are the types of things that I think really matter when you're thinking about building an inclusive environment for women within your organization. It's really around making sure they have community, making sure they're getting the right perks, and then also making sure they're paid the same. There's a lot of data out there that shows that in sales in particular, women are underpaid. There is not pay equity across men and women in sales roles, even though studies show that women actually outperform men in sales in most cases. So there was a report by Zachary. They said that women outperform men in sales by 3%. So 70% of women hit their quota in comparison to the 67% of men do. And women also hit their quota faster than men. There are so many studies around this. And so given that we know that women are actually really good at sales and have a lot of natural characteristics that make them a great fit for sales, I think companies need to really look at their pay structure and their compensation mix to make sure that there's actually pay equity across the organization too.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. And thank you for all those insights. But so yesterday I posted a story. So I have a lot of women who reach out to me just because, I'm on live and I'm a little bit more available than, the top 100 global sales leaders, right? So I'm a little bit more available. And, she was running into a problem where, she had a meeting with an executive within her organization and had gotten great feedback. Like, she's doing amazing. But she hadn't felt like she was doing amazing that entire time from the feedback of her supervisor, right? And trying to determine, all right, well, I'm happy. I've called Jen to let her know how happy I am. And Jen's like, well, what's really going on here? Because you've been on a job search, right? And so how would you support someone like that looking for feedback on, what to do with their career when they end up in an environment where they don't necessarily have the support that they're looking for?
Well, I think the most important thing that has helped me is surrounding myself with people who can navigate through situations like that. I think it's just so important to have kind of a board of advisors that you can reach out to for different things. I mean, you talk a lot about mentors and sponsors and the difference between that too, but I've always kind of thought of mine as a board of advisors because I feel like I have different people who are available to be the different tools in my tool belt. So there's someone I would reach out to if I need help, maybe negotiating an offer, or somebody I'd reach out to for on-the-job functional experience, or somebody related to career development, or somebody related to navigating a difficult situation with management, or something like that. So I think just having more and more people who are kind of in your tool belt to help you with those things is really the steadfast way to kind of navigate through that. But I think the other thing is just thinking about really what is the environment that you think you can thrive and succeed in. And one of the best pieces of advice that one of my board of advisors gave me once is he said, think about the best days you have at work and the worst days you have at work and write down the reasons why they're the best and the worst, and then start to bucket that list. You'll start to see some themes, and that'll really show you what gives you energy. And it's a simple exercise, but it's something that I do every year, really, because it's helped me to kind of think about what are the things that I enjoy doing and the things that I don't. And if you're in an environment where the majority of what you're doing is something that you really enjoy and it gives you energy and you're learning more and you're building new muscles, then maybe it's worth kind of trying to figure out that 20% of things that's not necessarily right. Or if it's inverse, then maybe it's time for you to think about what the next right job is for you. So I think sometimes we sort of create these illusions in our mind, I guess, that things are so bad. But when you really take a moment to just kind of write things down, you actually see, I do have the majority of the things to make a good recipe. It's just there's a few things that are missing. And then you can get the support of some of those board members, I guess, to help you think about filling those gaps.
That's a really great exercise, and trying to define what it is you enjoy and what energizes you and what brings you down and has that opposite energy. So that's wonderful. So thank you for sharing that. So are there times in your career where you've run into a challenge that was similar to the one that I shared? Maybe you could share something about that.
Too many times to count, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like many women, I mean, we've all faced a lot of challenges, especially in sales. I mean, let's be real, it's a very male-dominated environment. And for me in particular, I think, I'm very used to being the only in a room, whether it's the only woman, the only millennial, the only non-white person, sometimes all of those things at once. And I think with that, just comes some challenges. I think it can lead to imposter syndrome here and there. But it can also lead to people just saying strange things left and right. And so especially when you're earlier in career. So if there's anyone who's tuning in who might be in a more entry level, new hire role, I mean, there are so many things that you're going to face. And it's just really important to maintain that strength and that confidence in yourself, because there are going to be days where you feel like, do I really deserve to be here? And you have to remind yourself, somebody somewhere decided that I do. And so because of that, I have to use my voice. And, to give you a specific example, since you asked, Jen, I think about one of my first sales roles. I was in a customer meeting with one of my male account managers who is much more senior than me. And we were talking about an offer that Microsoft had, and he had shared a little bit of outdated information. And I had jumped in and I had said, oh, actually, we have a new offer. I wanted to tell you a little bit about that. And I did it in what I thought was the most respectful way, just kind of wanting to make sure that the client had the latest and greatest information without making him feel bad about it. But was really professional, or so I thought. And he jumped in and he said, sweetheart, I've been in sales longer than you've been alive. I think I know what I'm talking about. And in that moment, I was just so shocked. I mean, no one had ever said anything like that to me before. We were in front of a customer. It was so unprofessional. I didn't really know how to handle the situation. The Rakhi from today would definitely be more assertive and know how to handle it. But from the Rakhi from a decade ago, I mean, it was a shock to me. And so at the time, I didn't say anything, but afterward, I enlisted the support of a mentor, and I just kind of told her what happened, and I asked her how she would handle it, and she gave me some tips. And in the end, she actually reported it on my behalf, and he was ultimately let go from the company, not just because of that situation, but apparently he had a track record of doing those types of things. And so it was a great learning for me, because even though I wasn't comfortable or confident at the time doing anything about it, I'm so grateful that I had another woman who was in my court who did. And I think as I've sort of grown and progressed in my career, I've realized the importance of having those people. But now, more importantly, being in a position of leadership, being one of those people who can actually call people out when they're in situations like that. Because unfortunately, although it is year 2021, these things happen every single day. And I don't think being a woman in sales is particularly easy, especially in more male-dominated industries like construction, for example. And so we need to really make sure that we're supporting women across all industries.
Yeah. No, I've had a few of those moments as well. So anyone who's joining us, if you have any questions, please send them in. But Nisha says, Rakhi, you're amazing. This is a wonderful conversation. And then Maureen says, go Rakhi, I've been there. And sweetheart, no. Yeah. So, and I'm very familiar with the sweetheart. I had one scenario that I've shared before, but I had an executive join my team and I for a happy hour where we're celebrating wins. And the executive started asking like, oh, what are some things we can do to support you? And since the team was all really new, they looked to me, right, for the answer. They're all looking at me because I'm trying to give them space, to be able to share their thoughts. And so I share some of the things, and he says, I shouldn't have brought you. Mind you,
Wow.
he was joining my happy hour. And I remember just being so shocked and so embarrassed and so like, here I am and a leader in this particular scenario, and I don't even know what to do, you know. So like I didn't handle it probably how I would now. I just kind of kept to myself, and of course went to my board of advisors about how to move forward. But these situations like happen to people every day. I mean, I have so many people who reach out to me, um, and beyond just like the board of advisors, mentors, and other people that you look for support. You know, and I know there's a ton of webinars, a ton of learning on how to handle these, you know, situations that arise when you're a woman in sales or one of the only. I wonder why there isn't more like webinars and stuff for leaders to have more inclusive environments, or to think about the unique skill sets women bring to the table to start building on that diversity. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I think there has been progress over the past couple of years. It's just
Mm-hmm.
some companies, some industries are faster to the plate than others, unfortunately. And so, one thing I am encouraged about is you are seeing a lot of bigger companies, IBM included, who
Mm-hmm.
are being more transparent about even the facts and figures. I mean, how are you supposed to make change if you're not even willing to publicly share what your diversity statistics even look like, for example? So I think a lot of companies are now starting to do that and are kind of looking themselves in the eyes and confronting themselves and saying, okay, I have a problem in this space, in this space, in this space, and within the next 5 years, here's how I want to tackle it. So I think those are some of the things that are really helpful. But as you said, I mean, it really does start with the leaders. And so I think, a big piece of it is holding leadership accountable. I mean, even tying their pay structures, for example, to the number of women that they have in their organization or other marginalized groups. But it's not just about the raw numbers, it's also about promotions, for example. How many of the women are staying? How many of them are getting promoted to senior leadership? All of those things I think need to be looked at across every level of every organization.
No, agreed. Agree. We've got some great comments here where we have to have each other's back and stand up to people who say insane things like this. So glad you're taking a stand and sharing your story. We've got more range and your rule. Work with you and love you. Let's see what else we got. Big tech has webinars every day. It's true. There's so many webinars going on right now for just every different topic. I think this is just one area where there could still be more. But then again, when I look at it at leadership, how many would have the self-awareness enough to realize that they might need more training in that area? And is that up to the senior leadership to really, like you said, look at those diversity numbers and the career paths for women within the organizations to determine whether they're making progress?
For
So,
sure. And I think, one of the biggest things that we need to see change is having more men have a seat at the table when it comes to actually driving change. I mean, there are so many men who will raise their hand and say, I'm an ally, I'm an ally. But you got to make sure that you're actually walking the walk and talking the talk. Because, I mean, let's be real. I mean, men have contributed to the problem for centuries. We're going to need their help to actually fix
yeah.
this. And so, I'm really encouraged by seeing some very senior men take a stand. But I'll give you, a small example. Like for International Women's Day, most companies always do a big women's event, which is great. And many men, they share out the information on how you can sign up, but they don't actually attend themselves, or they might even schedule another leadership team meeting, which overlaps with that. And so then how can their teams actually attend? So again, these are really small things, but I think it's just so important that if you're going to be somebody who claims to be an ally, really participate in the dialogue and roll up your sleeves and see how you can make a personal difference.
Yeah, no, that's thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Tanya asked, do you know if there are resources for training to learn better skills to handle passive aggressive or aggressive encounters like this?
Well, one book that I read was called Crucial Conversations. And some of you might have heard of it, but that was really helpful for me. And I think that there's actually maybe a TED Talk on it too. But basically, it kind of helps you have some of those crucial conversations. And it's not just work related. She offers a lot of suggestions and scenarios on conversations at home with your spouse, with your kids, whatever it might be. And then, of course, at work with your management or subordinates or things like that. But I really like that book because it offers some tangible ideas on ways that you can actually address these types of questions in a way that doesn't seem confrontational. But I think sometimes, especially as women, we're afraid to speak up, I guess, because we don't want to make people feel bad. And we've got to get out of our own way. We are not going to make any progress unless we are willing to take a stand. And I think that there's a way to do that in a way that is non-confrontational, that comes across as professional. And I'll give you another example. I had a male colleague who he had a chance to send one of his salespeople to meet with a client. And he had a woman on his team who was an absolute rock star. She was definitely the best person who was suited to go meet with this customer, and they had to fly to go meet with them. But she had just come back from maternity leave and had an infant at home. So he said, I don't want her to feel like she has to go to this customer meeting and leave her family. And he thought he was doing the right thing by not asking her to go. He was like, I don't want her to feel like she has to do this. And I told him, I said, your intentions were good, but let her make the choice. Don't make the choice for her. And that was a huge light bulb moment for him because he was like, oh my God, I've never even thought about it that way. And I told him, maybe she is a new mom, but maybe she could use a night away from her screaming child. I mean, maybe she could use some time in front of a client face to face to get back into the swing of things. Let her make that choice. And he did go back to her and he asked her, and she was like, oh my gosh, absolutely. I would love to go to meet with this client. And so that's just, it's a small example again, but I think it just shows that not all intentions are bad. I always tend to try to assume positive intent, but it is up to us to just sort of educate people, I think, on some of the decisions that they're making and the impacts of them.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's like keeping an open mind, right? You don't know what you don't know, and you don't know until you ask. And assuming positive intent is always a good idea. So Rosemary says, I've noticed in my experience, male counterparts not getting the question of how old they are from coworkers as well as outside clients, where I would get those questions via humor. Any suggestions on the best way to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I get that question all the time, and it's just so awkward because I mean, most of the time you are working with people who might be in different life stages and things like that. So I'm the same way. I do tend to use humor. But I mean, I think it's okay to deflect or just say old enough to be here or something like that. I haven't really disclosed my age to a lot of people at work, frankly, because I think that it does lead to some unconscious biases, for example. And so I think what I've just tried to do, and I saw someone earlier in the conversation type this in the IM window, it's really just think about how do you use all of those things as your strengths. So when I was or have been the youngest person at the table, that means that I can innovate and invent processes that people might have never thought of. It gives me a fresh perspective to contribute to the business in ways that some of my more senior peers might not be able to do. And it gives me a chance to maybe have some cross-generation mentorship where, sure, people who are more senior are teaching me a lot of things, but at the same time, I can share some things with them about how to engage better with millennial workforce or Gen Z workforce, or how to target some of these people to actually be clients of ours or prospects. And so I think, once again, going back to I guess imposter syndrome, all of the things that you're nervous about, think of them as your superpowers, and think about, if I am the only person with no experience, that's my chance to really drive the business forward, move the needle, and help propose things that other people couldn't have thought of. And if you keep that in the back of your mind, I think you're going to really add a lot of value, and you're also going to develop your own confidence as you grow in your career.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. And Amy notes here, educate some people on the decisions they're making and how that impacts. That was a excellent point. And so we've got a lot of great comments in here, and I'm going to be sure to go back and thank everyone for their comments and questions. But we're at 12:30 already. It's half an hour goes really fast. So, any final thoughts from you?
I would just say be yourself and believe in yourself. That's kind of my main motto, I guess. I mean, we've talked a lot about that today in different shapes and sizes, but I think everybody offers something different. Everybody offers something to the business, something to help think about things differently. And so don't try to change who you are to fit in or to conform into the environment that you're in. Again, use those things as your superpowers. I mean, I can't think about how many times people would say hide your age to gain more credibility with a client, or maybe act a little bit more manly since you're in tech and you're a woman and all of those things. But I just have never subscribed to the notion that I need to change who I am. But again, instead, I just sort of use those things as my unique differentiating factors. So I hope all of you do that too. And if there's ever anything I can do to help you all, I mean, there's so many people who have invested in helping me navigate through some of these difficult types of decisions. But as I said, I mean, this happens every single day. And so feel free to reach out to me anytime on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever it might be. But I really look forward to engaging with your community and staying connected, Jen.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you and everything you're doing for women in sales and sort of leading the way. Next week, I've got Larry Long Jr., who is Mr. Positivity. So everybody needs to come back and see Larry, because he brings it. He brings it every time. So thank you so much, and see everybody next week.